friend Michele Mazelleغ. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to share with you all this video clip and then I'm going to come back and talk about it. So let's get into it.
I am seeing, as I'm sure you are, Trump's been racking up. He's got a lot of black celebrities that are now unafraid to say, I'm supporting Trump. You know, people like former NFL star Antonio Brown, Don King, rappers Kodak Black, Lil Wayne, Sexy Red, obviously Kanye West. These are people who are from the culture, who are cultural leaders, who have large followings, and are standing on the front line saying, look, I'm with Trump. And I don't care what y'all, and I hate to put this woman in the conversation as a celebrity. Mm-hmm. Maybe she is to some, but what's her name? Kanye
Rose.
West. There you go, Amber Rose.
Yeah, I feel you going there.
Gets invited to the RNC, stands up and delivers what some would call a very powerful speech. What's happening? Are we watching a change in real time?
I think we're just watching a spectacle. That's all it is. I wouldn't put much more on it than that. It's spectacle. Black people, as we well know, are not a monolith. We don't all agree on the same things, on the same issues. We don't see things the same way. We don't view the world through the same prism. And yet there are always those who are contrarian, to put it generously, to be charitable about it. I'll just call them contrarians. Let me just say this, and this I hope will make the point. I remember how heartbroken I was in college, frankly, near the end of my college career, when I was taking a couple of African-American studies courses, and one of my professors, Dr. Fred McElroy, and Dr. William Wiggins, two of my professors, Dr. William Wiggins, Dr. Fred McElroy at Indiana University in Bloomington. I was taking a couple of their classes, and I had to come to terms, Prez, with the knowledge that I was being exposed to, that there were Africans who sold other Africans into slavery.
Yes.
I could not wrap my brain. I had seen Roots as a kid growing up, but I could not wrap my brain around the fact that Africans would sell other Africans into slavery.
So, as you all already know, Trump won the 2024 election this past Tuesday. And the next day, the next hour, who knows, when there were some black women who went on social media and started to point fingers and blame black men for Trump getting into office. Now, this is not going to be a political video, because that's not what this video is focused on, but it is definitely going into what I'm going to be discussing. And the problem with them pointing fingers at black men is that they're pointing fingers literally at people within their own communities and blaming people in their own communities for the choice that they decided to make, to demonize them, to reprimand them. And that is what some black people do in the black community. And he said in his video about black people not being a monolith, people in the black community not being a monolith. And that's the problem. Because the black community is not able to at least come to some agreement on some issue or one goal in order for the black community to be moving forward. There's not even one thing that every black person can agree on. They don't agree on anything. And so when you're not able to agree on something, then that means that there's never going to be a unified front, because you're never going to come to the table enough to know that there's a common goal here. Doesn't matter who you voted for. It doesn't matter what other differences we have. There is this one thing that's going to bring us together, and that's how it's going to move us forward. When we're looking at the majority, the people that don't look like us, they're not monolith either, but they will come together for something. They will come together for the betterment of themselves, for the perseverance of themselves, for the preservation of themselves. They're going to come together for that purpose. Even if they have different beliefs or whatever, they're going to come together on one thing. But there are some black people in the black community, they are so quick to blame each other for things happening instead of really looking at the bigger picture. Now, Tavis Smiley definitely was wrong in the statement that he made. First, for comparing what the chiefs within these kingdoms of Africa, to compare them and what they had to go through during the transatlantic slave trade, to black people in the black community deciding that they want to vote Republican, or deciding that they wanted to vote for Trump. Those don't have no correlation. They have no connection whatsoever. A black person deciding they want to vote Republican is not going to destroy an entire community per se. Could there be some negative effects of a vote? Could there be a negative effect of voting someone into office? Absolutely. But it is not going to be at the magnitude that happened in these kingdoms of Africa during the transatlantic slave trade. There's no comparison. There's no one coming into the black communities ripping people or taking people from their families and shipping them off somewhere else. That's not happening in the black community as it was happening during the transatlantic slave trade. So someone deciding they want to vote for a different candidate versus a chief or a leader in these kingdoms of Africa trying to save their kingdom and protect their people, there's no correlation there. And what some black people like to do is place the blame on people that look like them. It's easier for you to be negative towards people that look like you. It's easier for you to find fault with them. It's easier for you to put the blame on them because you see them as somebody that is supposed to be without flaws. They're supposed to be without mistakes. And so when you see a flaw, when you see a mistake, there are black people in the black community, they would jump on another black person, and in this case blame these kingdoms of Africa for the transatlantic slave trade, for other people from these African kingdoms being sold to the transatlantic slave trade. They're always quick to excuse the majority, and that's what some black people in the black community were doing after the election. Instead of looking at the election how it is and really looking at it as a whole, as far as who's responsible for the outcome, is quicker, easier for you to look at the people that look like you, even though it's so incorrect, it's so not right, it's it isn't even close. It's easier for you to do that. And that's what some black people do. They are so easy to blame their own, destroy their own, criticize their own before they criticize anybody else. This isn't the first time this argument has been said by a black person in the United States of America. They say this all the time. And so let me break this down. Let me break it down because I'm really sick and tired of this narrative, because if you're not going to at least take the time to understand what was going on during that time, then you don't need to be talking about it. You don't need to speak on it, because you need to make sure that you're getting the facts right, and you got to make sure that you're looking at everything that's going on. So first and foremost, people in the United States who are choosing a different candidate, okay, or who are not able to come together as one, not able to agree on anything. We're talking about Americans here. Black people in the United States, within the black community, are all Americans. So you would expect them to have some type of unity, some type of commonality, some type of togetherness, because you're all Americans. But that's not the case. There's not even able to be a connection and a commonality between a group of people who are literally all Americans. He just said it in his video that not everybody in the black community are monolith, but he's not able to see that these are different kingdoms going on in the African civilizations. Not only were they not monolith, they were not the same in terms of the language that they were speaking, the culture that they was practicing, the areas that they were in. There was no such thing as Pan-Africanism then. They were not looking at each other and saying, oh, you're both the same skin tone, so let us come to the table and eat. No, you are from a different kingdom than I am. So no, we're not going to be breaking bread together. No, we're not going to be, on this type of even teal or whatever. No, because I don't want your kingdom to come and overthrow my kingdom. That's how it was then. Now, as a social studies teacher, the most exciting part of social studies that sixth graders enjoy to learn about is the ancient Greek civilization. They love to learn about mythology. Not only do they love to learn about mythology, they also love to learn about the two city-states that would be a part of the ancient Greek civilizations, which would be Athens and Spartans. When I am told to teach, or when I am given the standards to teach, not told to teach, but given those standards to teach, in the standards, there is a differentiation between the Athenians and the Spartans. Even though they are both a part of the ancient Greek civilization, they both will be Greek. There's a difference. There was a difference in the way they lived. There was a difference in the upbringing of the children. There was a difference in the culture. There was a difference. And so when I taught these two city-states, I taught them with differences in mind because they were different. When we look at the Holocaust, that, of course, you can't say anything bad about the Holocaust because you will get canceled. You will receive some backlash. And you definitely will receive backlash if you don't differentiate between the Nazis and the Jews. They were all in Germany, but they were different. There was a difference. There was a difference between the oppressor and the oppressed. There was a difference between the victim and the perpetrator. And when you teach about the Holocaust, you have to teach that difference. You can't put them all on the same field because they were all under the same umbrella as far as country-wise. There was a difference between these two groups of people, and you better make sure that you say the difference. That type of thinking doesn't apply, obviously, to the continent of Africa. It still doesn't in 2024. When people are talking about the continent of Africa, you still have people that will ask the silliest questions. As far as, if you were from Ghana, I have had people ask me, does my husband speak French? And I would tell them, no, he doesn't. Well, then they proceed to tell me that they know another guy. They know a guy from another country in Africa who speaks French. Okay, is he from Ghana? No. Okay, well then that's your answer. That's why he speaks French and he doesn't speak this language that my husband speaks. Is he from where my husband's from? Is he from the actual village and region that my husband is from? No. Well then that's the reason why he speaks a different language. People are not even able to understand that in Ghana, not everybody speaks Twi. Twi is the dominant dialect in Ghana, but not everybody speaks Twi. So those are things that people still don't know in 2024, that they're still not able to differentiate between the countries of Africa. And that's the same mentality that they have concerning these kingdoms of Africa. They are not able to differentiate between these different kingdoms. And just like in ancient Greece, where you had Athens and Sparta, in the kingdoms of the ancient civilizations of Africa, you had the Mali, you had the Songhai, you had the Kush, you had the Ashanti, you had the Dahomey. You had these different kingdoms that were going on in these in the African civilizations, and they all were in different areas. They all had a different language. They all had a different culture. They were not the same group of people. Now, it's funny how people want to talk about these kingdoms, you know, some kingdoms of Africa who sold other people into slavery, and they don't want to talk about the kingdoms that attempted to fight and lost. And I'm looking at my notes. You had the king of Congo, who fought to protect his people. You had the kingdom of Benin that also effectively protected the people. Now, people want to talk about the Dahomey kingdom. They had a big old thing about the Dahomey warriors with the warrior king. I can't even think of what the name of the movie is with Viola Davis. Yes, they did participate very heavily in the transatlantic slave trade, and that is because they wanted to sustain their kingdom as much as possible, and that was the only way they were going to be able to sustain it. There was no other way that they were going to be able to keep their kingdom intact if they did not go raid other villages and other kingdoms and other areas in order to preserve their kingdoms and preserve their people, to make sure that nobody was enslaving their people, to making sure that the Europeans weren't taking over their kingdom. They had to do what's called self-preservation, and that is exactly what's happening right now in 2024, when you have people that's voting for a candidate to preserve their way of life, to preserve their race, to preserve those things. And so when you see that those things are being threatened, you're going to do whatever is necessary to keep a hold of it. Now, when people see it in terms of that way, when we're talking about in the United States of America, that's fine. It's okay for certain people to preserve who they are, try to preserve their values by any means necessary. But then you have some black people that are not able to understand that that was the same type of preservation that was happening in these kingdoms of Africa, which is the reason why they participate in this transatlantic slave trade. They had to preserve their kingdoms, and that was the only way they were going to be able to do that. If they did not participate in it, they would have been overthrown. Their people would have been killed. And even when you're talking about some kingdoms that did fight against the Europeans ended up toppling their kingdoms anyway, enslaving the people anyway, and so there you be. It's crazy that in 2024, this is the narrative that people are still saying about Africans stealing Africans. That needs to stop. That is a false narrative, because they were not called Africans then. Now, that's the first and foremost. They weren't called Africans. They actually had specific titles that need to be addressed. They need to be acknowledged, and there needs to be a backstory to that. There needs to be a perception to that, because if it is today, you know, people in the black community are doing whatever is necessary, they feel, to preserve the black community. One of the things that some of them are doing is that they're getting on social media and they're bad-mouthing black immigrants because they're trying to preserve their community. And so they're doing whatever is necessary for what they can do to get rid of them. And so when you see that, even though you all have the same skin tone, even though unless somebody asks you where you're from, you're not going to know the difference between a Ghanaian and somebody from Chicago. You're not going to know the difference between somebody from Haiti and somebody from New York. You're not going to be able to know the difference between those two groups of people. But there's a difference. There's a difference. And you all make sure that they know the difference. And some of you all will not blink an eye, you know, if they get deported somewhere else. Y'all not gonna blink an eye. You look the same, but what do you say? They're not like you. That's the same thing that happened with the transatlantic slave trade, with these kingdoms of Africa. They look the same, but they were not the same group of people. So they did not see anything wrong with taking care of their own and preserving their own people, if that meant that they're going to raid another country, raid another region, or raid another kingdom to take over that kingdom so that they can preserve their own people. And in order for them to meet the demands of what the Europeans wanted with the slaves, they had to participate in the transatlantic slave trade in order to continue to preserve their kingdom and to protect their people, which is what they had to do first and foremost. Before I end this video, I do want to say this. There have been some leaders of some countries of Africa who have apologized for their role, for their ancestors' role in the transatlantic slave trade. And I understand the reason for the apology when it comes to Black Americans. I can understand that because you want to have that unified front. But it does get to a point where you have some Black people in, you know, some Black people in the Black community that's not even accepting that as an apology, because they're still saying the same narrative. And it's just like, okay, you tell me what you would have done. I'm just saying, what would you have done? And then they don't want to talk about the ones who didn't participate in the transatlantic slave trade. They fought against this transatlantic slave trade, and some of them still got toppled to the ground, and they still enslaved the people anyway. The narrative needs to stop. The myth needs to stop, because they were not the same group of people. There was no such thing as Pan-Africanism. They would not be called all Africans. And so you cannot continue to say that. It is the way things were then. It is unfortunate that it happened to the African diasporans, where they are all over the world. But the blame needs to be on the people that it needs to put the blame for, and to. It needs to be, the blame needs to be to the people who created the transatlantic slave trade to begin with, and made it into the operation that it became. And so that's where you need to put the blame on. Just like when you go to anything else and any other situation, you need to stop pointing the fingers at each other, blaming each other, demonizing each other, instead of looking at who's really causing the problems, who's really causing the issues, and to really come together for that purpose, and to say, hey, enough is enough. And all right, you all, that's all I have to say on the matter. I am Michele Mazelleغ. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.